but rather at a London hospital.
Even though Meghan had let it be known she wanted a home birth, it was probably very realistic that her first child at 37, it was going to be born in hospital.
The certificate lists the private luxury Portland hospital in Westminster.
A video dropped, and instantly, it shook the internet like a royal earthquake. The screen opened with that eerie, suspenseful instrumental. You know, the one that plays right before something huge breaks loose. The camera zoomed in slow, a shadowy Buckingham Palace silhouette gleaming under angry clouds. And then, that haunting voice cut through the tension. After years of silence, it said, the palace has finally spoken. And what they revealed about Archie and Lilibet? Oh, honey, the internet wasn't ready for that.
Of today's video. So at the time, Archie Mountbatten Windsor was born May 6, 2019. And this was surrounded by controversy, largely to the unconventional.
Because today's story, it wasn't your usual recycled royal rumor or another random fan theory floating around the web. No, this one came straight from inside those gilded palace gates. For years, the internet has been boiling over. Rumors, theories, arguments, and downright online wars, all over the youngest Sussex children. Every time someone tried to cool things down, another spark would reignite it all over again. Where were they born? Why were the christenings so private? Why have they been seen so rarely? And what was up with those strange palace records? Through every headline, every storm, Buckingham Palace said nothing, not a word. An iron curtain of silence, a royal wall that no one could break. Until now. Because apparently, even Buckingham Palace has a breaking point. And according to insiders in this dramatized version of events, that point came when a newly resurfaced documentary clip suggested royal protocols weren't followed during the kids' early days. That single phrase sent social media into a meltdown, a tornado in a teacup. Suddenly, the palace, usually slower than cold syrup, snapped into motion. Courtiers were whispering. Press officers were typing furiously. Senior aides were debating whether to finally break their sacred silence. What pushed them over the edge? A leaked report. It claimed inconsistencies in early documentation. Now, before people got carried away, it wasn't about nationality or parentage. No, this was about something else entirely: the palace's reputation. The rumors were spiraling into full-blown conspiracy chaos, threatening to overshadow everything royal. So, for the first time since Harry and Meghan walked away, Buckingham Palace decided to tackle it head-on. And they didn't just drop a dry press release. Oh no, too boring, too predictable. They did it through a senior official, one known for being as subtle as a brick through a window. The official sat down for an off-the-record briefing, which, let's be real, is royal code for, we're about to spill some serious tea. And the first question? Why stay silent for so long? Apparently, the palace thought the rumors would just fade away. But they didn't. They grew, they multiplied, they mutated. There comes a point where silence no longer protects the children, the official said. It feeds the speculation. Boom. Just like that, everything shifted. The palace wasn't defending Meghan. It wasn't defending Harry. It wasn't even defending itself. It was defending the kids. According to the briefing, they admitted that the extreme privacy around Archie and Lilibet had backfired. Keeping things secret, they thought, would protect them. But instead, it made people imagine the worst. Then came the line, the one that lit the internet on fire. There is nothing unusual about their identity. The public simply hasn't seen as much as they expected, and that was their parents' choice. Oh, that one sentence. It detonated online. Everyone suddenly asked, wait, so the palace agreed with Harry and Meghan's decisions? Or were there arguments behind the scenes? The official didn't confirm or deny, which, of course, said everything. And then came the real bombshell. For the first time, the palace admitted they'd been monitoring online chatter about Archie and Lilibet for years. They knew every theory, every wild claim. Weekly briefings, digital updates, they had eyes everywhere. One insider described it like a digital storm constantly battering the palace windows. And according to the same briefing, some of the most aggressive rumors weren't even from the UK. They hinted, ever so softly, that a certain American-style PR influence might have been fueling them.
Confused. Shortly before 2 p.m. yesterday, Buckingham Palace announced that Meghan had gone into labour. Then, 40 minutes later...
That's not our culture, the official said. We don't operate in a climate of sensationalism. Ouch. That line hit harder than a royal carriage at full speed. It was smooth, polite, but the meaning? Brutal. The palace wasn't blaming the public, they were blaming the machine. The chaotic narrative spinning endlessly around the Sussex brand. Then came the mic drop. The children are unquestionably members of the royal family, and that is the end of the matter. Except, of course, it wasn't. Because the second those words leaked, the internet exploded. People wanted proof, photos, records, anything. But the palace only gave half answers. They opened the door just enough for people to peek, then slammed it shut again. That vagueness, that royal ambiguity, only poured gasoline on the fire. Commentators dissected every syllable. YouTubers made 2-hour breakdowns. Morning shows turned into crisis panels. One British journalist said, "They're trying to put toothpaste back into a tube." Another said it was a glorified shrug. Meanwhile, whispers spread inside palace walls. Some aides were blindsided. Others said King Charles was furious this had gone so far. And behind all of it, there was talk that Prince William had been urging for months, shut this down before it gets worse. Because William? He hates chaos anywhere near his children. Out in California, though, things were boiling differently. Meghan's camp wasn't happy. Not with the words, but with the fact the palace spoke at all. Because the moment they did, the headlines shifted. Palace denies secrecy but offers no
details. Sussex is silent after palace intervention. If nothing is unusual, why years of secrecy?
By afternoon, it was pandemonium. Even Harry's close friends were worried. They knew how much he hated this attention. "This," one said, "is exactly what he hoped to escape." But Meghan? Oh, she was livid. Not because of the rumors, she'd been through worse, but because the palace's move felt like a warning shot. One insider said, it was their way of saying, we're reclaiming the narrative. And if there's one thing Meghan hates, it's losing control of the story. Within hours, her team was in motion. Journalists were being nudged. Influencers were being briefed. It was quiet, subtle PR warfare, all about controlling the coverage without leaving fingerprints. Meanwhile, the palace wasn't sitting idle either. That evening, lights stayed on late inside royal offices. Aides were pulled into last-minute meetings. The communications wing looked like it was running military drills. Because the palace knew something big. Meghan's silence never stays silent for long. They were preparing for her counterattack. And then, one journalist at the next briefing asked a seemingly innocent question. If everything is normal, why weren't the children seen at major family events? The aide hesitated. Just a second. But that second was enough. Someone clipped it, zoomed in, posted it. Look, they paused. Why pause if it's normal? And just like that, boom! A whole new theory wave began. It was like cutting off one head of a hydra, and two more grew back. Royal watchers went full detective mode. Old footage, timeline charts, even late-night comedians jumped in. Buckingham Palace, one joked, just opened a door they should have kept locked. 2 days later, another leak hit the press. A palace insider said, "If the Sussexes want transparency, they're free to provide it." Oof, that line was calm but deadly. Everyone knew what it meant. We're not the ones hiding things. Suddenly, Harry and Meghan were the ones under pressure. People wanted birth details, documents, photos, anything. Sources said Meghan was spiraling, pacing around, rewriting statements that never seemed perfect. Harry wanted to stay quiet. Meghan insisted silence was surrender. Back in London, aides murmured something chilling. "We've entered a new phase. We won't protect any narrative that harms the institution." Translation: if the Sussexes push, the palace will push back hard. And just when it couldn't get worse, a royal cousin, not too close but close enough, spoke to a columnist. "There are things the public doesn't know. If they did, they'd realize the palace has been more patient than anyone can imagine." That one cryptic quote was all it took. Within an hour, it was everywhere. Memes, TikToks, Reddit theories, Twitter think pieces. The internet combusted. Inside the palace, chaos. That cousin wasn't authorized. They weren't supposed to speak. But what made it worse? They weren't lying. One advisor snapped, "If the family can't stop fueling speculation, how can the public?" William stayed calm. He just said, "Let it breathe. It's good they know we've been holding back." And that's when everyone in the room realized William wasn't playing defense anymore. Out in California, Meghan was furious. She begged Harry to call the palace. "They won't answer," he said quietly. And that hurt her more than any rumor could. Because for Meghan, this wasn't just about reputation. It was about power. Her PR team scrambled, crafting statements full of sympathy and motherhood. But none of them felt strong enough, because the palace's silence was louder than any denial. American media began to turn cautious. Outlets that usually defended her suddenly hesitated. Then a royal reporter went live on TV and said, "The palace is preparing a timeline." The world froze, because in royal language, a timeline means one thing: receipts. Cold, clinical, undeniable receipts. "If the Sussexes push this further," he added, "the timeline will be released." That single line was like a thunderclap. Inside Montecito, Meghan's team went into panic mode. Calls, meetings, legal consults, chaos. "Stop the bleeding at all costs," one insider said, because she knew if that timeline dropped, it wouldn't just correct her narrative, it would destroy it. The palace doesn't move fast, but when it does, it moves like a centuries-old machine, unstoppable. A senior insider said softly, "We've protected them for years. We won't keep doing it if it harms the crown." That was it. The gloves were off. The palace wasn't scared anymore. It was ready to strike back. And when the monarchy decides to defend itself, it doesn't defend, it destroys. And then came the quiet before the storm. The palace's silence stretched on for hours, but the world was holding its breath. Everyone could sense it, that eerie calm before something monumental breaks loose. Then, right at dawn, a political columnist dropped a single line buried deep in an unrelated article. Senior palace aides are reviewing official records related to the Sussex timeline. That one sentence, it was like dropping a match in gasoline. Within minutes, news channels were ablaze. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, all in chaos again. People started speculating. What records? What timeline? What proof? And in Montecito, Meghan completely unraveled. Insiders said she spent hours crying, pacing, making calls that went nowhere. Harry was silent, too silent. One insider said it was like he'd finally given up. For years, he fought to protect their story. But now, it wasn't a battle. It was a royal siege. Meanwhile, in London, Buckingham Palace stood tall and still. Reporters camped outside those iron gates, waiting for a statement that never came. Because when the palace finally moves, it doesn't need words. It just drops history like a hammer. That morning, a royal spokesperson released a short, icy line that froze the world in its tracks. We remain committed to accuracy. Nothing more, nothing less. And yet everyone knew. Accuracy meant evidence, receipts, facts. That was the moment it ended. Because Buckingham Palace doesn't shout, it doesn't rage, it documents. And somewhere behind those gilded gates, the final page of this royal saga was being written, quietly, methodically, and with centuries of precision. Because in the end, when the crown decides to speak, it doesn't argue. It ends the conversations.